Hello from Diplomatic Language Services, and welcome to our podcast, Language Matters. We make language accessible to everyday people by discussing features which may not exist in other languages. I'm your host, Molly Sampson. Hello, this is Molly with our 10th episode of Language Matters, and today we are talking about Korean. And I have with me a native speaker of Korean, Go-eun.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요, Go-eun.
안녕하세요, Molly.
Okay, and 안녕하세요 to Mindy.
안녕하세요.
And she's a native English speaker but has learned Korean as a second language. So good to have these two perspectives, a professional linguist and a second language learner. So let's talk first about, I know Korean has an interesting history. Can you talk a little bit about the development of the language?
If you can talk about the development of the Korean language, including spoken and written Korean, then Korean is one of the oldest living languages. But scholars have different ideas about its origin. And some scholars say Korean is linked with Ural-Altaic language, which includes
what language?
Ural-Altaic, a group of language family.
Which language are those?
Mongolian.
Okay.
And even Finnish. And when I happened to watch a documentary of Mongolia, it really sounded like Korean. So the phonology is there, although I don't speak Mongolian at all. It was during the 7th century that the standardization of the Korean language started taking place.
For both the written and the spoken
right now
language.
I'm talking about spoken. At that time, we didn't have the written system.
I see.
So at that time, the Korean peninsula was divided into 3 kingdoms. And one of the kingdoms, Shilla conquered the rest of the kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And the Shilla dialect became the dominant language for the peninsula. And then throughout the subsequent dynasties, like Korea and Joseon dynasty, then the dominant language got the stronger linguistic features that makes the language be enough to be called as one single language, which is the Korean language. But about the written system, until like the 14th or 15th century, only privileged, educated people could read. Because we didn't have our own writing system. So
did they use the Chinese system?
Yeah, Chinese system. And we had this wonderful king called Sejong. And
he's amazing, actually. He really is.
And he felt very bad because only privileged people could read. So he wanted to help people in the nation can actually read. So he created this Royal Academy, and then started putting institutional effort to create the Korean alphabet.
To create the current Korean alphabet.
Yeah, that's called Hangul. Han means Korean, Gul means written.
I see.
Hangul is a subset of the Korean language, the written system.
So the written system, though, now is phonetic. And before, when it was using Chinese characters, I assumed it used the same symbol-based system.
Yeah, symbol-based system.
It did use a symbol-based system, like kind of like a picture-based
almost.
Yes. And then Hangul itself is an alphabet scientifically created by King Sejong. And he looked around. I love King Sejong, so I could talk about him for a while. And even today, the people in Korea, they attach the great Daewang, King Sejong Daewang, the great king. Out of all of the other kings, he's distinguished in that way because of the love that the people still have for him. And it's because he looked around, he saw that all the privileged people could write in Chinese, but for anyone who didn't have the money for education, so all of the commoners, essentially, they could not write, they could not communicate, and it was really limiting them.
Right.
And so he gathered scholars from around the kingdom secretly for years, I don't know if it was 13 or 14 years, in secret from the nobility. They worked to scientifically design this system.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the system. Can you tell me about the characters? I'm a little familiar with them, but I don't know how many. I don't know kind of the basis of it.
The Korean alphabet consists of 24 characters,
Mm-hmm.
14 consonants, and 10 vowels.
Okay.
And I'm talking about only like simple characters.
Mm-hmm.
And certain combinations of these simple consonants or simple vowels create double consonants or double
I see.
vowels.
I
So
see.
the whole number of sounds that Korean alphabet can represent is 40.
So when you're learning the system,
Mhm.
how do you approach learning the system? Do you learn consonants at once?
Actually, even going back to King Sejong, he wanted a writing system that was very easy for the common people to understand so that they could literally learn it overnight, essentially. And so if you
So
go
were you
to
able
actually
to learn it overnight?
So if you want to talk about the alphabet and pronunciation, yes, within like a day or two, you
Okay.
can literally learn how to pronounce the whole Korean alphabet, no problem.
Okay.
That's not where it becomes as complicated. It definitely becomes complicated, but it's not in the pronunciation or the learning of the alphabet. And that's also part of the reason why today Korea has a very low illiteracy rate because
I
almost
see.
everyone can read and write.
Okay. And is it written? I know it's written phonetically,
Yeah.
but I guess like English, is the spoken language very different from the written language? So if I were to read Korean, if I knew the alphabet, could you understand me? Or is the spoken language slightly different?
So the mismatch between pronunciation and spelling is far less severe in Korean than in English.
Okay.
The
Okay.
vowel system is far more straightforward.
Okay.
Of course, we do have a certain degree of mismatch. And Korean alphabets, it's really like phonetically oriented. So when King Sejong and the Royal Academy were working on like, inventing these alphabets, they were focusing on like imitating the sound of each letter in itself. How do we imitate the sound? Basically, each letter imitate the shape of the speech organs.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
for example,
Okay.
like when you like imagine like where your tongue is, whether your tongue is touching your upper palate or not, whether your tongue is curled. So these things are there in the letter design.
How it
Oh, that's very
looks.
cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Well, and the vowels, so that's for the consonants. The vowels are also really cool, and they're kind of based off this yin yang concept. And essentially, they represented basically the sky by like a dot, which now looks a little bit more like a dash, and they represented the earth by a horizontal line, and then they represented humanity by a vertical line. And that combination of sky, earth, and humanity, they take and they recombine to form all the different vowels.
Okay.
And so when you look at the
Interesting.
vowels, that's what you see.
Interesting.
Because it's so easy to learn the alphabet, people say Korean is the easiest language to read. But Korean is the most difficult language to understand.
It's incredibly
Yeah.
difficult to understand,
Yeah,
to
I
use the
believe you.
grammar.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the variations. You talked before about the historical variations, but now you've got the two different Korean countries. How different are the two country languages, North Korean versus South Korean?
I would say basically a lot of scholars say North Korean and South Korean, they are not different languages. They are different dialects. So the variations
agree.
we see between North Korean and South Korean is variation within one language. So basically, that means South Korean and North Korean, they can communicate with no serious difficulty. And the grammar is basically the same.
But if you hear a North Korean speak, you can tell they're North Korean
Yeah,
versus
because
South
the
Korean.
intonation is different. But I can find regional dialects, like different intonations across different provinces within South Korea.
I see.
So still, it's just variation within one language. But mostly the differences are found in lexical items, vocabularies.
I see.
And I think it's because of their language policy, which is tied to their political agenda.
So I assume they have far fewer borrowed words. I assume you get some influence from Japanese maybe, or from English, or different areas of the world.
Yeah.
South Korean has a lot of loan words from
Loan
English in the more modern context, but obviously North Korea would not have those loan words. Yeah.
So what are some examples of your loan words? We've talked before about a lot of in other languages. A lot of technology often comes in as a loan word, and
A lot of Sino-Korean vocabularies prevalent in South Korean, North Korean, they are translated into pure Korean. So one example is 가연성. Ka means possible, 연 means flame, fire, 성 means property, so inflammability. So that's Sino-Korean word in South Korean. But in North Korean, they say 불탈성. They use this 불타다, this pure Korean verb, and then 성, the property signer. So there's this pure Korean word component in North Korean. And another example is the name of the Korean alphabet. I said it's Hangul, Han Korean, and Kul, writing. But in North Korean, they call the Korean alphabet Joseongul. So Joseon is a dynasty that lasted before Japanese colonization of Korea. So in North Koreans' mind, we are still Joseon.
I see.
So they call it Joseongul. So Joseon writing. That's example. And another example is about English loan words. So panties, underwear.
Oh, panties.
Yeah, panties, yeah. And in Korea, like in South Korea, we use it panty, no S. And panty is underwear for both men and women.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the denotation changes. But in North Korean, they don't use the word panty. Instead, they use this word, 으뜸, 부끄럼, 가리개. So there are three pure Korean components. 으뜸 means number one. 부끄럼 means shame or shyness. 가리개 means cover.
Oh, so the number one covering your shame?
Yeah, number one shame cover.
Number one shame cover.
Yeah, number one shame cover. So when I look at like these like pure Korean words, it's very like immediate to the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's very creative and cute.
Yeah.
And we have a word 볶음밥. 볶음밥 means fried rice, but the direct translation is mixed rice, South Korean, pure Korean. But in North Korean, 볶음밥 is said 기름밥, meaning oil rice. So there's no sugar coating, very immediate, very direct. So what they perceive, it's really like in that word.
So yeah, we had talked a little bit before about grammar structures and how difficult it is for students to learn, English speakers. So I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about what is so different from English, or what's kind of interesting in the Korean language that makes it difficult for us to learn.
From a learner's perspective, so as we already said, like learning the alphabet is pretty straightforward, but then once you actually start to put it together, it gets much more complicated. And so a couple of reasons for that. One, the grammar order is different. And also with the grammar order being different, a lot of times I feel like Korean sentences can be a lot longer than perhaps English sentences. Like you could have 3 or 4 lines, whereas most standard English sentences, a line, 2 lines, right? So you get really long sentences with really different word order. And so your brain basically kind of has to do a pretzel if you're like an English speaker to kind of flip things around.
So English, just to remind people, is subject, verb, object. Yep. And in Korean, it's kind of subject, object, verb in general?
In general. But you can also switch object and subject. Okay. But verb is always
comes at the end.
End, yeah. And of course, if you have multiple sentences connecting, then obviously you've got multiple verbs coming in at different places. But basically the statement before the action or before the adjective, so adjectives and verbs both come at the end of at the end of the sentence. But what else makes it hard is the hierarchy system. And so there's a certain amount, when you're speaking to different people, you use different forms of the same word. And so one, you have to understand your relationship with the person that you're speaking with. And 2, they may be speaking in a different form to you than what you're speaking into them.
Does Korean also, do they call it the honorific system?
They call it the honorific system. Words like 전답말, right? And so that kind of that hierarchical system.
Is there a distinction between how many categories there are as far as Romance languages use formal, informal? How many kind of categories do you have, or do you?
I would say
use them?
commonplace categories, because there are many categories,
I
quite
see.
frankly. Even the king uses a different category,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
But commonplace categories, you would have kind of like your panmal, right? Which is
Yeah.
more between friends, or
Mhm.
if you're talking to children. So if you want to say like a very simple sentence like I ate pizza, right? So pizza 먹고요, or 먹고. So pizza 먹고, like 저는 pizza 먹고, or 제가 네. Or if you were speaking to someone who you would not really, like, maybe you know them, they're an acquaintance, you just met them in the store, there's someone kind of in your general area, pizza 먹고요. Or if you're speaking to maybe someone who's a little bit higher up, pizza 드세요.
you may be able to work with 3.
3 or 4.
Normally, when we just assume a situation, a conversation held between two people, there are 2 level of hierarchy,
Yeah.
and this is linguistically realized in different ways. One way is we put this special suffix to verb stem, so she. That's one way, so morphological strategy.
Yeah.
And second is we actually use a different verb to express respect. So there's like a whole different lexical
Oh, that
item.
makes it really hard.
Yeah, and also like the pop rice.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
we use a different noun to denote pop for older people.
I see.
So
I
that's
see, I
another
see.
level. And the third level is you can actually lower yourself. So when you call yourself,
Oh, so just as a strategy.
your strategy
If-
and
If I want to say, "Oh, I know, I want you to be above me,"
Yeah.
be
Have a
kind of
little more
humble.
respect.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we use a different type of pronoun to address yourself, like I,
I see.
and in a humble sense.
I see. So how much does it bother native Korean speakers when you mismanage that system? So oftentimes I do it in other languages, and I know I do it, but I have no control. How much does it affect you as a listener?
It actually affected my childhood because my parents and when I was taking linguistics acquisition class, normally people say language as a child you don't learn and nobody teach. But I do remember my mom taught me, and I had to pay special attention to actually use it in the proper manner. And I've never seen any non-native speaker of Korean perfectly uses this honorification system.
So when a non-native speaker, so if Mindy makes a mistake, how much does it bother you? Like, are you?
It bothers me a lot.
Okay,
Just
okay.
kidding.
Oh. Well, you're a long-time teacher. I guess a normal Korean who's not used to listening to.
So I can speak about this a little bit, Molly. So she would have the more insider's perspective, but certainly as someone who is trying to learn Korean in the Korean culture for 3 years, people were incredibly kind.
Okay.
They were incredibly generous. Maybe in some situations it was probably annoying to them, but they were very quiet about it and very polite. And so I found Koreans in general to be overall very helpful, very respectful, and just excited that I was even trying.
Right.
And I was really grateful for that. So it made it a safe environment to learn. It made it a safe environment to practice. And just because you can read and write, this is another part of learning Korean. Just because you can read it and write it doesn't mean you can speak it. Speaking it is
Quite
a different. And so you just have to make mistakes. And
Yeah,
Koreans, because they have studied so much English, Koreans are very good at English. Almost much more so than even a lot of their neighboring countries. Like they have started studying when they're young.
Right.
Practicing, they're really good by the time they're in elementary school. Like, it's quite amazing what they do with English. And so they also understand how hard it is, even though it's been around for a while, how hard it is. And so they are very, at least on the outside, and with me, we're very, very kind about it.
Yeah. So do you have maybe one more maybe grammatical thing or linguistic thing that students struggle with?
Grammatical thing that's so difficult, so I wouldn't want to talk about it because it's so much. But like I can talk about the vocabularies because they're, for example, native English speakers will try to find a translation equivalent of an English word. So, for example, like hair. So, hair means basically fiber on skin, any animal in English. But in Korean, we have a different word. So, we have a word 머리. 머리 is hair only on your head. 머리 also means head, but the hair on the other body part, they are not called hair. They are called 털. 털 is equivalent to fur. So although the
I'm missing something, I think.
okay, so like hair on other body parts,
I see.
it's called 털.
Arm hair.
Yeah,
or,
so
털.
we would call
Fur.
it, arm hair, leg hair, they call it fur.
I
So
see.
your legs have fur growing on them,
I see.
basically.
I see.
Yeah. So learners should be careful. Okay, although the fundamental meaning is the same, but the use is different. And another example is in English, wear. I wear perfume, I wear clothes, I wear socks. But we use different verbs depending on the body parts that's relevant to that action. For example, we use 쓰다 for hat. We use 입다 for clothes. We use 신다 for socks. So
see.
the lexical item, like the usage is more like fine, has
Those
more
are the
fine
verbs
grain.
associated with.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have more fine
Fine
tuned.
grain. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so we usually end the podcast with maybe an interesting idiom or a proverb that you like from your language or shows something about the culture. Do you have any interesting examples?
I think I'm just talking about like pop too much. And primary,
Which is rice, right?
Rice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Primary meal for Korean, primary traditional diet is rice and some side dishes, and normally like fermented fish or fermented vegetables, including kimchi. It's very like essential side dish. So fermented fish, like a crab, fermented crab. These things are called 밥도둑. 밥 means rice and 도둑 means thief. So when you have these salty fermented side dish, your rice goes very quickly. So the side dish is bland for it. So we have an expression,
Okay.
밥도둑.
So those side dishes are called rice thieves.
Rice thieves.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna use that next time I go to eat. I'll use the English, but I'll just say, "Oh, my rice thieves." Right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Did you have any?
Instead of an idiom, I was just thinking about how much, even though Korean honestly is not an easy language to learn in general, how much I actually love learning the language. And you'll see a lot of people in Korea learning the language because a lot of Korean culture is becoming more and more prevalent. And so there's a lot of soft power in like Korean dramas and K-pop and things like that. And so the Korean language is just, it's spreading and it's spreading. It's spreading in these really beautiful, fun, unique ways. And these types of ways make learning the Korean language really delightful.
Well, that's a great way to end. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mom.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Language Matters. To our listeners, you can continue the conversation by tweeting us at DiplomaticLS, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Diplomatic Language Services.